Hello guys, this is CannibalChess, and today we're going to be looking at my game against Dashbot, rated 1500. I have white pieces, so I'm going to start the game as I usually do with d4. He goes knight f6, just taking control of the e4 square in a different way. I can't really move e4 now. If I did, he would just simply take and be up a pawn, so I can't move e4, so I decide to move c4. And what this does is it still takes control of the d5 square as e4 usually would, just takes control of that same square. So I move c4. He moves e6 to get his dark square bishop out, maybe to e7. b4 would also work, especially if I move c3, which I do. I move c3, so he could move something like this would be a decent idea. I mean, I could always counter with bishop there, but it's still a good idea to have pins on your opponent's knights. So that's an idea. Also, he in a way is preparing d5 as well, just to strike in the center. Also get his knight maybe here, or also his bishop there could go there as well. Something like that will work. So here he goes d5, and you don't want to take the pawn here. If you take the pawn, then it becomes just an even position. You don't really have any more advantage because all the mystery in the position's gone. Basically, it's a symmetrical position, so you want to avoid that playing white. So I don't take the pawn. I just bring my dark square bishop to g5, pinning the knight to the queen. And here he decides to just bring his bishop to e7, just to defend against the pin. I'll also make it to where he can castle next move. And here I just continue development. Now you don't want to take the knight here. It's an alright move, but it makes it to where his bishop has this nice long diagonal. It's also hitting one of my only centralized pawns here, so you want to avoid that if you possibly can. So instead I just move my other knight out to f3, and here he asks me if I want to take the knight. So either I take the knight basically, or I move back maybe to f4 or to h4. So I don't want to take the knight because of what I just said. I don't want him to have a nice long diagonal, so I just move back. And pushing the pawn further to attack my bishop here would actually be a mistake, because it's opening up the king side too much. He is not going to get all these pieces out anytime soon, so he's not going to castle queen side. And now he can't really castle king side, because if he did, then it would be easy to just find ways of attacking him, like maybe at some point something like knight e5 after I drop my bishop back, knight e5, and then get my queen out to d3, something like that would be logical to try and end the game really quickly. So instead of pushing the pawn here, which would be a total mistake, he just simply castles, which is the best move. And here I just complete my pawn chain and also make it to where my light square bishop can jump to maybe d3 or e2. And here he decides to go after this knight. He also wants to have his knight on a nice centralized square, a nice outpost for the knight. It also creates a double attack on my bishop here, so if I don't capture his bishop, then he will just take mine, I take his, and then the queen takes my knight. So he would gain 2 pieces for my 1, or he would, yeah. And I don't really want that to happen, so I just take the bishop, he takes, and then I take his centralized knight because I don't want him to have a big advantage with a centralized knight on the board. So I take his knight, he takes mine, and here I play the second best move, which is d2. And the reason why this is not the best move, although it does attack this weak pawn because the pawn's not guarded, this move here centralizes my knight. And also what I failed to see in this position is that he cannot threaten my knight with f6, because if he does, then I have this amazing fork on the queen and the rook here. So that's why the knight does indeed belong on e5. I just didn't really see it in the moment. So here I just move back to attack the pawn. And of course he can, and he does, move his pawn to f5 just to defend the e4 pawn. I don't mind this too much though, because it's opening up this diagonal on the king quite a bit. And so here I see the opportunity to move my queen out to b3 to put it on the same diagonal as the king. And also what this does is that it keeps the light square bishop over here from doing something like d7. Because if the light square bishop moves to d7, then I can just take this pawn, and then if Dash tries to kick my queen away, then I just simply move back, and then I will have just gained a pawn for no reason. So that's also what I was seeing here, was that I can keep the bishop on the back rank longer. The computer here is saying that knight b1 would have been best. I think just because then I can move it back to c3, something like that, and then it's kind of defending or attacking the central squares. So that's what the computer's seeing. I wanted to do a more forward attack just to get my queen out there. It hasn't really been active all game, so I'm just trying to get her out there. And here Dash continues development by moving his knight to d7. I think he's preparing e5. The computer's saying to just push e5 immediately. I think he's just preparing for it, which is totally fine. He also could now try and fianchetto's light square bishop as well, so it's just different ideas. And here I just continue by moving my light square bishop out. The computer says that I should just create this pawn chain, finish up the pawn chain, make it to where his queen can't attack this diagonal, so both ideas are fine. And here he does a very odd move. He just moves his a pawn down. And this doesn't really do much because I have a few options here. I can move a3, and if he does this, then I can just move my queen. Then his queen doesn't really have this move. It looks something like this. And then now his queen can't come to this square, so it can't really get in the position. Or I could just push a4. This does create this kind of threat of his queen coming to b4. I could always just take. I didn't really want to do that though, so I just simply castled, and I wanted to see what he would do here, and he just continues to push the pawn, which is definitely not what you want to be concerned about here. You want to, as the computer is saying, push e5, just get at the center of the board as fast as possible, and you have enough attackers now to take the center if you wanted to. Dash doesn't really see that, so here, instead of moving to a3, because I didn't want to trade queens here, I didn't want there to be double pawns on the a file, so I don't move there. I just move to c3 instead, not wanting to trade queens. And here he just moves his pawn down again, and at this point you don't want to take, because if you take, then he has this rook defended by the queen here, and it's attacking my queen, so you don't want that to happen, so you don't take the pawn. What you do is you push it. And here I kind of forgot that he can't really en passant on the third rank. He has to be on the fourth rank to en passant, so his pawn would have to be here, and then if I do that, then he can en passant, but he's not on the fourth rank, so I just push it once, forgetting that I could push it twice. And it would be better to push twice, because then his queen loses her range and stuff on the board, so that's what the computer's seeing here. So I just push it once, and this also completes a very nice pawn chain as well, so I'm not too worried about it. Here Dash tries to get his knight more into the game, just guard this square, also maybe jump to this square at some point. Would be decent. And here I finally try and I want to get at his pawn chain here, because I don't like how it's keeping my knight from going maybe to f3, or keeping my bishop from going to f3, because this would be a nice long diagonal for my bishop. So I want to get at this pawn. And here he doesn't take the pawn. And the computer's saying that he should have, which I find it odd, because then you're giving me this nice diagonal for my bishop to be on. So it's kind of strange that the computer's saying that she should take the pawn. I didn't really think he should take the pawn, but what he does is definitely not the best move either. It just moves the queen to a more centralized square, something like that, where you can get at this center pawn. Wouldn't really be able to capture it anyway. Maybe he's trying to defend against that. I don't know, but either way, he should have addressed this pawn in some way, but he doesn't. And here I just take the pawn. And the best move here is to take with the pawn, because now I can't take back with my knight, because then I lose my knight for a pawn. But instead, dash here decides to take with the knight, and what this allows me to do here is that now I can take his knight with my knight, and this opens up this f file here. And so of course I'm going to take the rook, because if he takes with the king, then I go here. If he takes with the queen, then I do the same thing. And here they're actually saying that this move rook f1 is an inaccuracy. It's actually the second best move in the position, so I don't know why they're saying that. It's obviously a good idea to take control of the only file in the game, especially if it's by the king, so I don't really understand why they're saying that it's an inaccuracy. They're saying that I should have done something like queen c2 to attack this center pawn, just get it out of the way. The queen can't really come down and defend it forever. So even if she tries something like this, you just move over with the rook, and then it pushes the queen back maybe to this square, and then from that square then you can just bring the bishop here, because yes, the pawn can take the bishop and then you can take the queen, so the pawn's going to fall at that point. So this is what the computer is saying I should have done, to just get rid of this pawn, and then also the queen would have this nice diagonal here and this nice diagonal there. So, but I don't do that. I want to directly attack black's most important piece. And here dash just moves his queen to the side here. The computer is saying to just move it to d6 would be better, to have it on a more center square, as I said before. Dash doesn't do that though. I mean, this is probably a decent move as well. It's just not the better of the two. And here I finally find the move that the computer is wanting me to find, which is to just attack this weak pawn. And dash tries to defend the pawn in a very odd way. It's not a good way to defend the pawn. I mean, there's no real good way of defending this pawn at this point. It's going to fall no matter what you do. So all I have to do here is just push my g pawn to g3. And now the queen has to move. She can't move here because my bishop's guarding that square, so she has to move back. I mean, she could move here, and this might seem like a tempting move to some of y'all, but this is actually not a very good move, because this now traps black's queen, because after I take the pawn, the queen has nowhere to go. She can't go to this square because of my bishop. She can't go here because of my rook. She can't go here because of my pawn, and she can't go here because of my bishop. So the queen's basically trapped, and that's why the evaluation bar here is saying that it was at 4.9, but then when you play this move here, then it goes to like 7.8, something like that. So it's a very bad move. You just want to get your queen back, which is what dash did here, just to the e7 square. And here I finally take the pawn. And at this point, it's a very winning position for me. There's no real threats that black's posing. My king is a little bit more out in the open, maybe, but I have more attacks coming on the king. So with that information, after he moves his light square bishop out, I continue the forward attack on his king by making it to where I could potentially deliver checkmate on h7 next move. And the way he defends this is by moving his pawn up. Now this is an odd move, because it's making it to where his king is way more exposed than it should be, but it also defends against h7, because now if I try this, he can take my queen with his queen, and then I take his queen, but then he gets up on a piece. So that's how it's defending it. The computer here is saying that doing this would have been a better idea, which I find that strange as well, because I could just take the pawn and then directly attack him. Now obviously he would defend with the queen, and then I would do something like I would take at this point because my position's better here. His king is trapped on these two files, so that's what I would do. But it just kind of seems like an odd thing to push g6 and then just have it taken for no reason. So he goes g5, and here instead of taking this pawn, it's a free pawn, it would also make him have to move his rook out of the way. I'm trying to checkmate him as fast as possible here. And so I go after his king directly, and he defends, but I don't really care about taking the queen yet. I want to get my rook up here, and now he takes my queen. And then I take his, it's a check. And here he has a few places he could go here. He could go here, he could go there, he could go here, or he could go h7. So he actually chooses like the worst option he could possibly choose, which is here. And the reason why this isn't a very good option for the king to be on square is because I now have a chance to have a discovered attack on the king here. You don't want to align your king with your opponent's bishops, like ever. So after I move my rook anywhere, then it'll be attacking the king, and then it's a check. So I just see this as an opportunity to take this pawn for free. He has to move now, and then I just simply pick up the other pawn as well. So I just got 2 pawns out of a discovered attack, which is very good for me because I'm up 3 pawns. It's a winning position. And here he makes the mistake of going after my rook. And the reason why it's kind of a mistake here is because I can now push my rook up to h7. It's defended by my light square bishop here. And so his king has to move. And his king, after it moves, it can't get to his bishop to defend it in time. So I just take his bishop for free, and now I'm up a bishop and 3 pawns. So there's no real way to win this at this point for him. And so he tries. He brings his rook over here to defend this, or to attack this weak pawn. There's no defense on it, but I just push it up. And so now my light square bishop is defending it, and I also have this nice long 3-line pawn chain, kind of pawn wall to come marching forward. So now he tries to get rid of my rook. I don't really want a rook trade at this point. I just want to push my pawns, get promoted, get a queen on the board, and checkmate him. So that's what I'm going for here. He moves his king up here, and there's a nice idea that comes with this move. And if he had moved here, then I wouldn't have had that idea. So after he moves here, then I have this bishop to g6 move. And this may look like a blunder, but it's not, because if he takes the bishop, then I take his rook, and then I'm up a rook in a losing endgame for him. So it'd be a mistake to take the bishop here, which he doesn't take the bishop. So he moves to e6. This is attacking my rook, and I don't want to give up my rook yet, so I do it again. And he still can't take the bishop because of what I said before. Then I would just take the rook. It'd be rook in game against pawns, so there'd be no way of winning it. He doesn't want to take, so he moves back, and then I push my pawn further. And he does have this f6 move here to attack my bishop, but now I'm fine with taking his rook, because after I take his rook and he takes my rook, then I can create this kind of pawn chain. Bishop becomes a pawn in a way, and makes this nice pawn chain to where he can't break into this pawn. So that pawn's staying on e6 until it gets promoted, basically. And here he starts moving his pawns down. I create this nice 5-pawn chain. He ruins it, basically, which is fine for me. And here he tries to go after this pawn. But the thing about this is that he can never take my d5 pawn, because if at some point he takes this pawn, then not only do I have mate and 8, which I probably wouldn't see, but I can also move my pawn up, and now he's not in time to stop it from promoting. So he's never going to take my pawn, basically. So all he can do is push his pawns. I'm just bringing my king up just to get into the game more, And now he's out of pawn moves. All of his pawns are blocked by my pawns, so he has to move his king now. And the most logical place to move it would be to move here, right? Because it keeps the king defending this pawn from getting promoted. I also can't move this pawn yet because then he would just take. So I have to move my king up a little bit more. And now he has to move back to one of these squares because this pawn is guarding those squares. My king is now guarding those squares. So that forces him all the way back to one of these three squares. So he goes to e8. I bring my king over, and he could go here. I would probably push, and then he would try and keep the pawn from getting to the end of the board by doing that. But then I would have something like bishop d7 as a nice sacrifice. It would look kind of like this. And now he can't stop my pawn from promoting. So that would have been my idea if he had moved back here, which he does. Wait. He moves to the opposite side. And here, instead of pushing, which would result in the same thing, basically, you just that's what would happen. Instead of doing that, he decides to just kind of run away. And so I'm allowed to promote. And here there's a nice mate in 3, where I can bring my queen to c6, cuts off all the squares except for a7 and b8, so he moves to one of those. I bring my bishop in. He can't capture the bishop because the queen's guarding it, and so now this is the only square that he can go to, and after he moves there, then I just move my queen and basically checkmate him. So that was the game against Dashbot, and I hope y'all liked this game. I hope it was a good learning experience for y'all, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.